Good evening and welcome to another episode of Cooking for a Picky Eater. Today we are going to be making chicken pot pie. What I love about this chicken pot pie is it will feed a lot of people and it's very inexpensive. This is not the simplest recipe to make, so I'm going to show you a couple of shortcuts that will make your life just a little bit easier. We're going to have a lot of things working at the same time to get this chicken pot pie finished. The first thing that we're going to start with is bone on, skin on chicken thighs. And these are going to be braised so that they're falling apart. They are going to be added to the entire mixture. But the reason that you want the bone in and the skin on is that this is also going to create the broth that we're going to use to make our gravy, which is one of the essential components of a good chicken pot pie. So we're going to begin by seasoning the chicken thighs, and to save some time, rather than having to go to the cupboard to get a million different seasonings, we are going to be using an adobo seasoning with pepper. So this is going to have everything that we're going to want as far as seasoning is concerned for this first part of the process, and we're going to shake a generous amount of this onto both sides of our chicken thighs so that when we flip them over, we are going to get depth of flavor all around. To start the process of cooking the chicken pot pie, we are going to add just a little bit of oil to the bottom of a Dutch oven. And we are going to brown both sides of our chicken thighs. We're going to start with the skin side down. Let this go about 3 minutes on medium-high heat, and just don't touch it. Let it get some nice color on one side before you turn it over to the next. Once you've got some good color on your chicken, you're going to want to turn them over and let them go for another 4 or 5 minutes on the opposite side. Yesterday I was making some tacos, and I had cut up some onion to do that. I used one large onion and I had some left over. So this is going to be the equivalent of a small onion. This is actually half of a large onion. I'm going to add half of this to the chicken when it's finished browning. We're going to save the other half. We're going to use that later on in the recipe. Lift the chicken from the bottom of the Dutch oven. Make sure it's not stuck. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cover this with water. So we're only going to add enough water to cover our chicken. We're going to put the lid on that and let it simmer for about an hour. In the meantime, we're going to get everything ready to make our crust, because that's going to have to refrigerate in the icebox for about a half hour before we try to roll it out. The next step in making our delicious chicken pot pie is to begin with a pastry crust. So I'm going to make a standard pastry crust, and then we're going to flavor it. If you wanted to use this recipe for this pastry crust for a pie, you just follow it without all of the added steps. We're going to begin with 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to use 1/4 cup of chilled salted butter. We're going to use 1 cup of vegetable shortening and a teaspoon of salt. After we finish combining all of those ingredients, we are going to add a teaspoon of water at a time until it forms a dough. In this case, we're going to add a couple of more ingredients to that so that it makes a really flavorful crust. So we're going to start with our spices. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. We are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of ground sage. We are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of celery salt. Now, if this is something that you want to cut the sodium down on, by all means, don't have to add the regular salt to this at all. And then we're going to add some rosemary leaves to this as well. We're probably going to add about 3/4 teaspoon of this, because we want there to be enough of it that you can physically see it in the top layer of crust when it covers the pie. So we're going to add about 3/4 teaspoon of rosemary leaves. Into that, we're going to add the quarter cup of salted butter. We've cubed this up so that it will blend in nice. If you want to, you can mix the flour through this so at this point so it doesn't clump up, so that you have that butter flavor dispersed throughout the entire crust. We're going to add 1 cup of vegetable shortening, and I have this neat little gadget that helps me get it measured pretty exactly. We'll drop that in there. And in the usual situation, there is a tool that you could use to break this all up and combine this. I don't know if I've told you this story yet, but Sean and I are technically between 2 households at this moment, and I left mine up at the other house. So I'm going to improvise, and I'm going to use the beater from the Cuisinart, KitchenAid rather, and I'm going to see if this does the trick too. Basically, it's going to break the shortening up into pieces, and it's going to make almost like crumbles in throughout the flour. And then when I'm finished getting all of this broken up into little bits, I'll be right back, and we'll start adding the teaspoon of water at a time until we get it to the consistency that we want. I'm actually pretty impressed with how well that mixer blade worked to break up the shortening and the butter into these crumbs. So this is what you're looking for. You want to have nice small size crumbles, and to this you're going to add 1 teaspoon of water at a time until it starts to come together to form the dough. And you're just going to add a little bit of water at a time, like 1 teaspoon, and you're going to start to form this together. You're going to press it together with your fingers, and you will definitely see when it starts coming together and making the consistency of a pie dough. Just a little bit more. And make sure you pull all of the flour and all of the shortening off of the bottom of your bowl. You don't want anything to be left behind. This is going to take just a little bit more. So it probably took about 4 teaspoons total. And that water is ice cold. I had left that in the refrigerator, and that really helps. You do not want it to be room temperature or warmer, because if it is, it's going to start melting the shortening and the butter, and you're not going to have a flaky pie crust. And that's one thing that's really good in this recipe. So as you can see, once you start working in that water, it'll all start coming together, and it's going to form a nice ball of dough. Take this ball of dough, leave it in your bowl, cover it with some plastic wrap, and put it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes or so. You want it to be ice cold when we try to roll this out. It will help it keep it from sticking to your rolling surface, and it will also help to keep it from sticking to your rolling pin. The next step in the process of making our chicken pot pie will be to cook 1/3 of this bag of egg noodles. The next step, I took the chicken out of the pot and I shredded it. I made a pot of stuffing using a stuffing mix from the grocery store, and I used the broth that was in the Dutch oven with the chicken to make the stuffing. And now what I'm doing is I'm heating up the Dutch oven again to create a gravy. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of flour, and I'm going to add 2 cups of water to create a roux. And then we're going to flavor that water with a chicken bouillon cube, 2 chicken bouillon cubes, and then we're going to use that as a gravy over the pot pie before we fill it. Okay, here in the bottom of the Dutch oven, I've got 2 tablespoons of butter, and I've got 2 tablespoons of flour, equal parts, and we're going to create a roux. We're going to mix the flour as best as we can into the butter and cook off the uncooked flour taste. And then once that's nice and hot and bubbling and a little bit brown, we're going to add 2 cups, just over 2 cups of water. And what this is also doing is going to pull all those wonderful flavors that the brown bits here that you see on the bottom of the Dutch oven. It's going to pull those up and add a wonderful flavor to our gravy. Okay, let's start to put this together. To the stuffing, I'm going to add 1/2 bag of frozen mixed vegetables that I've left out at room temperature just to thaw a little bit. And to that, we are going to add some of those cooked pasta noodles that we had made earlier. And those are fully cooked pasta noodles, 1/3 pound. Okay. And then we're going to mix that together and put our gravy on top. The last step is to add in your chicken and give it a toss. And then that is the delicious filling for your pot pie. I have the bottom crust rolled, put into the pie tin, and that's chilling in the refrigerator. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've put our delicious filling inside of the pie crust. And we're just going to come in here and we're going to put the top crust on. Let's see if we can get it out with one piece. Okay. Well, close anyway. We'll see if we can get this to shift over just a little bit. Maybe I'm going to end up breaking it if I do that. Alright, I'm just going to piece this in here. And this is going to be more about taste than about how it looks at this point. Okay. Once you get your crust all covered, you're going to go ahead and crimp the edges. And you can either do this by pinching and folding one crust over the other, if you're able to do that the way that I'm going to do it. If not, this would work just fine if you were to take a fork and put the little indentations into the crust with a fork. It would work just fine. The main thing to do here, once you're finished crimping your edges here, would be to cut a couple of holes in the top of the pot pie to allow some of that steam to escape. Otherwise, it's going to separate the 2 crusts from one another. You can go ahead and brush either some milk on this or an egg wash, and then you're going to put it in the oven at 400 degrees for anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes. Everything on the inside is cooked. So you're just looking for a nice light golden brown crust on the top, and then that's going to be it. We'll bake this in the oven anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes. And this is what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Now, I'm not going to cut into this because we're taking it over to Morgan's house, and that's Sean's sister. But I will be sure to cut into this and take a picture and post it to my Facebook page. I hope you really try this and enjoy it, and we'll see you soon.